Hello everybody, and welcome back once again. My name is Jordan, also known as JMonster, and today I've got another Silmarillion Total War battle replay for you. This game is fresh off of our testing server. I will say that it is not a super close game, but it is by no means a blowout in one way or the other. But there are some really cool tactics on display that kind of get to the heart of how I want Silmarillion Total War to play, and the experience that I want people to have when they play it. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff I think that goes into it. It's probably one of the more like active, dynamic replays I think I've showed on the channel in quite some time. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. Today we're going to be squaring off about 4,300 or so Tulin Gaurhoth and Green Elf troops against the Haladin and the Angband faction. I think the Haladin have been showed off already. If not, well, this will be the first time that you see them. And the Angband faction, I think, has at their disposal about 6,000 or so troops. So each side has about half of a division, or 5 to 6 battalions. So, pretty even in terms of numbers. The balance bar does give a little bit more of a chance of winning to the other side, but that's mostly due to the amount of infantry on the field. I would say that composition-wise, these armies are pretty evenly matched. And so, as we usually do, let's take a look at the army that I am bringing to the field today, as I will be playing in this particular game. I'm playing as the Elves of Osirian. I've got 3 Sentries of Galeon, so I did go a little bit into the red in order to get my hands on a third company of them, because I figured they'd be a pretty useful advanced skirmishing force on the rough terrain of this map. This is the DOR-LOMIN map. It may or may not stick around, or it may get a new name, because we do have another more competitive, well, I don't know, I like this map, but some other people may feel it's more competitive in that it is flatter version of this map that was made by Rex, but you'll see that in a little bit later. I've also brought 2 companies of the Outriders of Dwylwyn, and these are by far going to be some of my most important units in this battle. But they are not going to be activated until about a third, nearly 40% of the way through this battle, so we're going to be playing very patiently today with how we use these Lancers, because they can get shot up pretty nastily if you reveal them too early. I've also brought some Skirmishers of Rathloriel with their attack upgraded. I've got 2 Hunters of Rathloriel units, which I intend to use as line infantry after they toss their javelins. I've also got some Urfin and Tower, 2 units of. And I've got a single solitary company of Spearhost of Rathloriel. A lot of holding units on my infantry, not a lot of big dig damage, except for the 2 units of Urfin and Tower, of course. I've also got 2 companies of the Kinsmen of Denethor. I will be using them as sort of crisis troops for our line, since the Kinsmen of Denethor, being the Osirian Legendary Company, have a few unique perks to them, and one of those is being locked morale. So they make pretty good crisis troops, very good at holding the line. They also have slashing damage instead of piercing, so they do a little bit better against all other unit types that use slashing. I've also got 3 companies of the Scouts of Galeon. I'm going to give them all attack upgrades as well. Probably a little known fact about them is that the dagger weapon type, which of course this unit has, does offer armor piercing in close quarters, in addition to some really just beautiful, very stacked melee defense bonuses. The downside, of course, being that its base damage is significantly lower, so it's good at holding out. It hits harder when it does hit, but it is less likely to get through melee defense for more skilled units. There's my other company of the Skirmishers of Rathloriel, and the rest of my archers and so forth over here. One other thing to note is that one of these units here, I think it is actually this unit of Kinsmen of Denethor, has my general in it, so we're going to be keeping him back for a while. Let's go ahead and take a look at the army of my ally here, and they're being played by King Amar, and he's of course playing as Tulin Gaurhoth, the Isle of Werewolves. He has brought, and I'm actually really happy to see this unit on the field. I have had many discussions with our testers about the viability of this unit, and I think with more units getting like missiles, like especially with the Haladin faction, they do have a lot of like mid-range missiles. They do have some long-range missiles as well, but they are quite limited in their ammunition pools. The Gijaxkara Zagulkalab, the high-tier Wolf Guard cavalry, have been the subject of much debate as in terms of their usefulness. I personally think that they are great, and as I was saying earlier, this is a sort of situation, and against these kinds of comps, that this heavily armored and well-shielded cavalry can be particularly useful in, and you'll see that throughout the game. So we've got 2 units of the Gijaxkara Zagulkalab on display today. We got 1 unit of the Ash Priests, because it wouldn't be a Tolin Gaurahoth army without the Ash Priests, or at least without Sauron. And you're going to be seeing the Ash Priests uniquely on the field today. We've got some Thrang Sheik Wolfborn as well. We've done some changes to our 2 HP cavalry units, in that they are not 2 HP anymore. And this goes for the Roqueni Megaloro as well, but they have some other changes that we can discuss a little bit later on and down the line. But needless to say, the Thrang Sheik Wolfborn have gotten larger. I think they went up from like 30 to 50. And their cost has gone down commensurate with their stat line and the lack of a second hit point. So they're a little bit more affordable. More or less, they function as the same unit. There's just more of them, so the attrition isn't as significant as quickly. Like, it doesn't add up the way that it used to with the smaller units, which would quickly become combat ineffective after just a few volleys from certain units, like the Arqueni Findicano, I think is the name of them, the armor-piercing archer from House Fingolfin. Second company, the Gijak Skaraz, is there as well, and you probably can't see them because I think they're hiding somewhere. But we do have the Vorbak Gajutor on the field today, and that is the legendary company from Tol in Gaurahoth. They are a sneakier, stealthier, and faster version of the Laugskaraz. They do lack armor piercing, and they have much lighter armor as well. I think they lose about 3 or so armor points, but they do gain a shield, and they do gain locked morale as well, so they can be very, very sticky, very, very irritating as a unit. So the Vorbak Gajutar, really, really strong cavalry unit, when used appropriately. If not, then they can get shot up, and it's just a nightmare for you. His infantry lineup consists of Gijak Skaraz, a Wolf Guard, and a lot of heavy infantry units like this. Not all of them, mind you, but some, and this has been added to factions like Doriath, for example, and a couple of others. They now have an armor upgrade. It doesn't entail a visual upgrade, but it does give you the extra stats, so they get a little bit of extra armor. But of course, Tolin Gaurahoth being a faction that specializes mostly in light and medium infantry, they do pay extra for the privilege of upgrading their armor. So it's a little bit less cost efficient for Tolin Gaurahoth, but it is nonetheless sometimes worth it. And the same goes for the Chosen, of course. We've got 2 units of each of those units on the field today. I think we've got 2 companies of Skarahai Trappers. 1, 2. Nope, we got 3 Skarahai Trappers on the field today. A whole mess of Blood Drinkers, probably about 3 or so units of Blood Drinkers, and a couple of Long Fangs as well. So, very mid-tier heavy, not a lot of the Hishbukraz units. It's not uncommon to see the Howlers, especially now that they have the Relentless trait, but we're not going to see any of them on the field today. We've also got some Hishbukraz Hunters, though, so the Ashclaw clan are represented on the field of battle today, just in a very minor way by the Ash Priests and the Hunters. So you're only going to get 1 of those Hunters today on in this battle. So anyway, we're going to pop on over to the other side and see what our opponents bring to the battle today. Yes, and just one minor amendment to our army compositions from before. I forgot that I had a detachment of the Skirmishers of Rathloriel hanging out here up on this hilltop, and they are a little bit different from the rank and file in that they are slower, but they can hide everywhere. They do have poison arrows to hit the morale of units that are unfortunate enough to feel the sting of their bows. But in any case, let's pop on over to the other side. Let's take a look at the Ang Band army here. And they're going to be commanded by Artorius Waifu, who is our lead tester and very, very capable at Silmarillion Total War. He's got a couple units here of the Wolf Riders of Angband. You don't see them too often. They are kind of a niche pick. But I think once you see the rest of his army, it is going to make sense why he chose to include these units, especially with Tolin Gaurahoth on the field. You do want to have a little bit of a mobile presence as Angband, as without that, you are kind of at the mercy of the fast-moving units from your enemy. So it is nice to have the Wolf Riders of Angband on the field, even though they are not the best of cavalry. His army comp is largely spears. I mean, obviously these gotta go for like spears and missiles and stuff to try and counter both the green elves and also take advantage of the lightly armored nature of Tol in Gaurahoth. So he's got 2 companies of the Spear Guard of the Iron Crown. He's actually opted to go over the red limit for the Tormentors of the Iron Crown. These are the mace units. We're going to have 3 of them, and they're going to be forming his main line. And they're going to be defended by, I think, 2 to 3, maybe just 2 companies of the Wretches. There's a possibility that he's got 3 in there, and I think one of them might have actually been given an experience upgrade as well. He's also got 2 full companies of Ironshot Arbalists, and in addition to, he's got a detachment hanging around here somewhere. So a half-strength company of them. 3 units of the Ironshot Ravagers. Not seeing a lot of the armor upgrades on the field today, as I think he's been playing around a little bit more lately with not having them. And He's also gone over the red limit on the Thralls of Angband. We've got 3 companies here of those low-tier archers, and the volume of fire that 3 of these companies can bring to bear can be very, very dangerous to the Green Elves because of the lightly armored and generally unshielded or low shield value nature of that faction. So this is very much tooled to be a bit of a problem for us in that regard. So they want to kind of hold us in place and pelt us to death with their missiles if they are able. So that is something to be worried about. Actually, now that I look at this, oh yeah, there's the, I thought he had 4 units of the Thralls, but indeed he does not, unless he does. 1, 2, 3, 4, oh, we brought 4 of the Thralls, I didn't even realize. That is a lot of potentially very scary ranged firepower. And now, let's take a look at the Haladin. I don't know if you guys have seen these already, in the event that someone has not already revealed them to you, and I am releasing this a little bit prematurely. I'm sorry, everybody. But I will explain a little bit about the House of Haleth. In brief terms, there will be a proper showcase that comes out later. But they are largely dependent on their light infantry. They get some really good terrain bonuses, especially on this map. They can take advantage of a lot of the scrub terrain and forest terrain bonuses that they have inherent to many of their units. And they also have a lot of mid-range punch. So think of them as sort of like the opposite of Assyrian. They're like a Assyrian if they were inclined to stab you in the face instead of shoot you from the tree line. To that end, they have a lot of mid-range missiles. They also do have some long-range capacity, but they sacrifice ammunition on them just as sort of a faction trait. One of the other things the Haladin have going for them is that they are extremely fierce and brave warrior peoples, and they don't break and run very easily. They have very, very high morale values, extremely sticky force, not an easy thing to handle, especially with that mid-range punch that can be a real problem for the Green Elves. Now, Huskarlar, a lot of the Haladin bonuses are also dependent on their weapon type. So the Huskarlar, being Axemen, upgrade their attack a little bit more cheaply, 20 instead of 40, which is what the rest of the faction pays. And they also get an extra point of base damage, which does greatly increase the damage that they can do overall when I am calculating their stats. He's also got, I think, 2 to 3 companies of the Swear to Brother of Thargelion. These are pretty interesting units. So they're the only Haladin units that can upgrade their armor. They have some of the best armor, as you'd expect from their model. But sword units for the Haladin are relentless, which means that they do not have a block animation. So they can't get staggered, and they're always hitting you. So they do damage in sort of their own different way, whereas the Huskarlar are a little bit more about brute force. These guys are going to grind you down over time, outlast you with their armor and their superior skill. I've got some dismounted Mardrot of Malduin, which is a dismounted variant of the Javelin Cap, which is unfortunately not on the field today. This is going to be used as sort of a makeshift bodyguard for Tundra's Fox's army. I don't think I've mentioned that he's playing it, but you've probably noticed that already. But yeah, so this is the bodyguard here for Tundra's Fox. The dismounted Mardrot of Malduin, I think, are only really useful as a support unit. So if you have a lot of like heavily armored or like small elite units, they can be really useful for the chip damage against them. With the 8 damage armor piercing, you can shave off a fair amount of HP from a single small target unit. But to bring them on the field today against both Tolin Gaurahoth and the Green Elves, neither of whom really have any units that fit that bill anymore, it's a little bit of a strange pick to my eyes. Of course, they are spearmen, so they can be useful in that regard for countering cavalry. But it's a bit of a risky pick. There are some legitimate bodyguard units that Haladin can bring, those being the Daur-Wartha, which are like a jab axe hybrid, and they're very, very ferocious. So taking them today, like it was a little bit strange to me when I go back and look at it for a second time. Have some more of the Huskarlar here. I don't think I've talked too much about them, but they are an axe unit. They also have throwing axes. So very, very nasty from close range. Really good charge value. Really good base damage as well. Not something that you want to play around with. In the back here we have the legendary company for the House of Haleth, courtesy of Sin of the Dark Cloud, who allowed us to use the lovely maidens from the Reforged mod. And their thing is that they are a female variant of the Berserkers. There is a Berserker unit in the Haladin faction. They are unshielded, they have very little armor. They're also relentless with a high mass, and they are armor piercing. And you also can't break them, of course. So they're extremely cool for it's like an interesting new counter to beating up like spear wall units, so pikes, halberds, that kind of thing. They just muscle their way in. They don't care. They have multiple HP, and they will just trade really efficiently, especially with an Angband halberd line. So the Skullbearer are a little bit different. They have armor, they have shields, they don't have the relentless trait, they do maintain the armor piercing, but they have throwing axes, and these throwing axes are particularly special in that they have the thrown trait. So when used against elephant class units, say Sauron, Uroloki, Balrogs, chariots, there will be more chariots in the game, things like that, things that are an elephant class unit. Ents are another one. They're a hard counter, and if they hit them, they're basically guaranteed to just take them out. So it's a hard counter, one of the few that exist in the mod to elephant units, and it is unique to this faction, and it does help give them a little bit of identity as a sort of monster hunter, at least in terms of that particular unit. So we got some more Swearderbrother right here, more Huskarlar, and then more Swearderbrother, sort of deployed in like a triplex Achilles formation, which is interesting. One of the other things that Haladin do well is ambushing, so they've got a lot of hidden units. So you're going to see Rigswear, which are like a low-tier sword/berserker unit. They're like a tar pit. They're Loch Morale. They have a javelin that they can throw. But yeah, they're more of like a niche pick. Interesting choice for this army, but they can be pretty good against the Green Elves, I would say, with that javelin of theirs. We've also got some of the Fryswear, which are a hybrid archer/spearman, so they can be really good at protecting your advanced units, zoning out cavalry, in particular the Green Elf Horse Archers. When supported, the Fryswear can be basically an unstoppable force against any sort of advanced vanguard deployed Green Elf mounted skirmishers. But yeah, that's going to do for their armies here. Let's go ahead and jump into the replay. Hope you guys enjoy it. Okay, so in the opening moves here, why don't I talk a little bit about our deployment and about sort of our strategy moving into this. So, as you can see, I'm trying to make really good use of the stealthy aspect of the Green Elves. So I've placed a couple of units up here on the hill so that they can fire over one another, but they also have their kind of pick of where they want to fire down to in this valley. And because of the superior numbers of our enemies and the sort of swarm tactics that Angband in particular likes to employ, we've decided to try and funnel them into this little valley area between this arbitrary red line, which I know everybody hates, and the hills and all this uneven and broken ground over here. But of course we also want to try and pick on some of their more important mobile and ranged elements if we can, because looking at their army and trying to size it up, you can tell that they've really gone for a pretty ranged heavy focus, with the Haladin sort of making up more of the meat of the line on the like line infantry side of things than Angband is. And my ally, of course, is going to come over here and assist me as well. Worth noting that I've got some Outriders of Dweilwyn deployed right here. They're going to be sitting here for quite a long time, and I've also got that second company actually just behind my lines right here, way back, so they're not going to get caught out, and we can use them to launch some sudden assaults. But we do really want to funnel our enemies into this this kind of choke pointy area by any means necessary. Oh yeah, okay, so I forgot about these guys. There's a couple of stealthy cavalry here from Tundra's Fox as well. These are the Waltschreider Dragoons. They are a medium cavalry, and they have some arrows that they can shoot, but that is not their main purpose. They're actually axe melee cavalry, so they've got really high base damage, and if you can get them charging into some low melee defense units with that axe and like the bonus that Haladin units get to axes in particular, they can be truly frightening and almost a lancer unto themselves, only really stopped by high armor and high armor piercing. But he's going to pop them over here, and he's probably trying to counter the advance of my Green Elf Sentries of Gelion moving into these hilly areas. And if you look here, I've got quite the screen of them. One company has kind of swung far to the east, and I'm going to try and maybe bring them around the back here if I can, and rain a little bit of death and destruction down upon my foes. Of course, we've got this hilltop to protect us, so some hit and run attacks with the Sentries of Gelion can be particularly effective in that sort of situation. Where's my second company as well? Yes, of course. So company number 2 is heading over here, and they're going to be hiding in between these two hilltops here, sort of in the middle of the deployment of the other two units. And then, of course, I've got these guys right here. So I'm going to try and move them up. Move them in, like, short, slow bursts, basically, to hopefully confuse my enemy and help them forget that things are there. So I'll move them in these short, slow bursts, hit the stop button, and then hopefully they'll go down into hiding in a few short moments. And then our enemy won't be able to see them. So yeah, they're going to drop that hiding. And it is kind of the game I think you have to play when you use hiding units if you want to try and be, like, genuinely sneaky. Because it's easy to forget where things are. And of course your enemies can see whenever you move units, they can see all over the map. Line of sight isn't so much of a thing, and like the fog of war doesn't really exist in this version of Total War. And you can't exactly hide them in the tree line either, because they'll still be seen there if they move. So I'm going to pop them down there, let them hide. Tundras has moved up his Well-Tried Dragoons here onto the top of this hill. And I think he's trying to sort of lay down some suppressing fire against my troops over here, the ones that I had just moved up. But unfortunately, there's a little bit of a hill here. And I wanted to just let him do that for as long as he wanted to. As of course, you should never interrupt your enemy when they're in the process of making a mistake. And so his Well-Triders, he's going to notice that he's going to just let them sit up there on the hill for the time being. Now, if we pop around to the other side here, you can see the Angband forces moving over to join their ally, and their strategy is going to be to kind of overload the wing of one of our armies and to try and break things up, and that's called an oblique. And it's potentially a very, very difficult tactic to thwart unless you have the right tools for the job. And the Green Elves are unfortunately a little bit limited in their ability to deal with armor, especially from range. They do have some options in close quarters, but when it comes to range, not really an easy thing for us to do. Luckily, we have, of course, our ally here, Toland Gauderhoth, and they've got a good amount of infantry already way on its over to our position, and they're going to reinforce us. And King Amar, bringing around all of his cavalry here, just shadowing the rear of that Angband army, just waiting for an opening. There's a lot of anti-cavalry tools here. The Iron Shroud Ravagers in particular trade extremely cost-effectively with cavalry off the charge. If they manage to get caught without being able to get their charge bonus, then cavalry can really do a lot of damage to them. But if they countercharge, then they are able to trade very, very well. Of course, there's plenty of thralls, but there's also wretches and crossbows and things like that mixed in here, and like overlapping fields of fire that would make a frontal assault, even on this fairly disorganized column here, extremely not worth it, and likely result in the destruction of all of that cavalry. And so Artorias is going to be free to rejoin his 3,300 or so troops with the 2,200 of Turnus Fox over here. And they're going to start moving together in tandem and take this this hilltop ground. So, in the meantime, there is some important stuff over here. Sentries of Gelion have managed to spar a little bit with the Well-Tried Dragoons. Unfortunately, we missed it because I was blah-blahing elsewhere. But there is a little bit of a fencing match going on here, and the Well-Tried Dragoons, they have a lot going for them over the Green Elf Skirmishers. They've got better armor, they've got high missile damage, they can hide anywhere, but of course they have the all-important shield. So, from the front, they can actually be quite difficult to stop, especially since if they get into close quarters with the Sentries of Gelion, then that's basically it for that unit. They will cut them apart extremely quickly. But one of the things that these sentries do have going for them, of course, is the higher numbers and the greater ammunition pool. So they can fence at range for longer than the Well-Triders can, but if they get caught in combat, close combat by the Well-Triders, then that's basically game over for them. But Tundras Fox, he pushed forward here, trying to bully one of my Sentries of Gelion out of place. I was able to bring this other unit right here. You can see them sort of falling back now after that action. And I brought them up here to cover the retreat of my sentries as they retreat, and you're going to see a lot of that in this game, just covering the retreat of your missile units with other missile units. And I'm not exactly an expert Green Elf player by any means, but I think that that is an important way to play them, is just having those overlapping fields of fire so that something is always shooting. You're never moving all of your ranged units all at once, because then you just eliminate all of your pressure, right? So Tundras Fox pushed forward, tried to get a piece of my Sentries of Gelion, and realized he was pushing too far forward, and if he got too far, I was going to be able to spring a bit of a trap on him. So it's a good thing that he pulled back when he did. But if he pushed too far, then he would have been completely surrounded. So he did right to fall back, but he had, of course, turned his back to the Green Elves, and that was the result right there. But Tundras is going to try a different tack, and I think that this is a really good use of the terrain. He's going to take some of the Fryswear, the Spear Bow Hybrid, and he's going to park them right on top of this hill. And he's going to be able to basically give support to his Dragoons. He has more or less a good idea of where my my hidden Horse Archers are stationed at this point, so we can basically provide overwatch fire for just about anywhere. If I come through here with this unit, he's going to be able to shoot at them. If I come through here, he's going to be able to shoot at them. And of course, if I move these guys over here, he will indeed be able to shoot at them as well. And that can be a bit of a problem for our lightly armored and unshielded horsemen. And so we're still in that maneuvering stage so far. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it up a little bit. You can see some cavalry movement in the back. MR very carefully walking through the stakes here. If you guys aren't aware of that, your cavalry can pass through stakes, you just can't run through them. You need to be careful that you take the stakes kind of head on, because if you go sideways, then some of the units, when they're reforming, will start to run and they impale themselves in those stakes. So you want to do exactly what MR is doing right here. Take those stakes straight on instead of trying to go across them sideways, because not only are you going to take longer to get across those stakes, but of course there is the aforementioned danger of animations kicking in through no fault, more or less, of your own, and skewering some of your valuable troops, so you want to be careful about that. But now Amar's got his cavalry position in behind, free to move as quickly as he wants to in order to take a position over here and threaten the rear of the Angband and Haladin host. And there's a little bit of action up here. Yes, so I was trying to bait some of the Fryswear. I know that they don't have a lot of ammunition, so I decided to park them here. They were getting better shots off than I expected. I expected most of these to sort of rebound harmlessly into the hill. And you can see a little bit of that. But my sentries are still taking some damage, but far, far less than if they're being shot directly by those Fryswear. So we're just trying to waste a little bit of his ammunition here. And I think Tundra's Fox isn't gonna notice it. Oh no, he's gonna go after these sentries of Galleon here. So we did see kind of what I was up to there. And now he's going to shoot these guys, push them out of position. He's going to move forward with the Welsh Riders. Both companies of them that still remain, totaling, I think, about 70 or so of the Welsh Riders. It's about 70 out of 100, 70% cavalry strength with his mounted arm. And now essentially Galleon are going to be forced to retreat under fire. But again, I brought another company forward here to try and cover them in the event that the Welsh Riders decide they want to give chase. And they do still have some ammunition on some of these units. And then over here, this is really, really nice. So, intentional or not, Amar brought these Hitchbrook Hunters in here, and this is a really, really tempting target for the Welsh Riders, because they could absolutely butcher this unit. And then that's a missile unit that they basically managed to get rid of for free. So, King Amar is going to use one of his hidden units, the Vorback Gadgetar, start to bring them forward. And I'm also going to support him by sending some of my Sentries of Galleon here to the high ground. So whether or not he wanted to do this, he did manage to bait Tundra's Fox's Welsh Rider Dragoons into a pretty precarious position here. And so, of course, they're going to take down some of these Hitchbrook Hunters. They're going to kill quite a lot of them very, very quickly. While there are some really nasty things bearing down on them in return. So the exchange, I think, ends up being ultimately in our favor as these units begin to flee. They're going to come under fire from Green Elves from the high ground. Just like Obi-Wan, we understand the importance of seizing the high ground, and we're going to use it to our advantage here. And I am going to overextend maybe just a little bit here, because I was expecting them to continue to move backwards, and I wanted to just harass them all the way. But I see that there is a possibility of these Welsh Riders turning around and getting into close quarters with my Sentries of Galleon, so I will move back to the larger unit, again, covering the retreat of that mounted archer with another mounted archer. And now when I see some of these Welsh Riders begin to maybe think about diving in to that blob of horse archers, I'm going to start to pull them back. But as soon as I see him begin to retreat, again, we want to give chase. Eliminate the shield value by firing into the rear of the Welsh Riders. Their armor is okay. It's medium, so it's about 5. But we have 6 damage arrows, so we do have a pretty decent shot at taking these guys down, especially with no shield value from the front. Their shield value is like 6 or 7, I think, and it's more than enough to to block us from the front. You can see I brought both my units now of sentries down off that high ground, and Tundra's Fox is going to try to retreat here with the Wall Triders, but they're going to suffer grievous losses as they attempt to disengage. And the Fryswear of Brethel moving forward. Now, what I think I personally would have done if I was Tundra's Fox is use these two units, the Fryswear and the Wall Triders, in tandem with one another, because so far my despite the prowess of the Wall Triders in close quarters and the fact that they do have shields and a missile unit, that they can use, they kind of get outmaneuvered, and at least in terms of like maneuverability and longevity, they're outclassed by the Green Elf skirmishers. But using the Fryswear to cover his retreats, for example, I would not have been able to chase nearly as far, and even if I did chase a little bit, trying to get that extra chip damage off, he would have been able to make me pay for it with the Fryswear. So I think that's the big problem here, is trying to use the two units of the Wall Strider Dragoons as a battering ram against a very mobile, very fluid force that's never going to give you an opportunity to bring that close combat prowess to bear. And so, yeah, the result here is that a lot of those Wall Striders were killed off. I think we're probably looking at about over half at this point, probably about 60 or so % of his Wall Striders have been taken down, and I don't think they've managed to get a single kill in exchange. So in that regard, we've done, I think, quite well for ourselves. But yeah, I'm going to bring my my skirmisher screen back now, continue to harass wherever I'm able, but there are, of course, Fryswear up here on this hilltop, and so I can only really go so far. And Artorias and the Haladin under Tundra's Fox have brought most of their strength over here, and they're preparing to take this hill. Now, we do still have a presence in the back. We've got 3 units here of that Tolan Gauderhoth Cav, which can be so mighty. But we're not really... There's no versatility in this force. It's pure CQB, and there's a ton of skirmishers and a ton of like really nasty traps here. So seeing the need for that, I am actually going to take some of my Green Elves here. Yeah, this Sentries of Gelion unit and this one as well. And I'm going to see a gap in the line that we've managed to sort of open up by destroying the Wall Striders. Now, I think we've kind of put the fear of Eru into the heart of Tundra's Fox at this point when it comes to using the Wall Striders uniquely against my Sentries of Gelion. And so he's going to pull them out. He's going to try and save the rest of the numbers for the fight that is to come, which I think is a really prudent call on his part. So we're going to push through here, try and get through this this big old gap that we've managed to open up, and move to support our allies, and thereby becoming a much bigger threat to their back lines. Might be able to keep some of their forces back once the big mainline scrap that you can see already brewing begins to take shape. And there's really just this one hill here that separates both teams' infantry forces from one another, and infantry are really where the Haladin and Angband kind of come into their own. Like, they're very scary infantry factions, and Artorias has brought a ton of the high-tier troops, a little bit atypical, not a lot of the halberds and things like that you would normally see, which could be a really big problem for us potentially, but there's a lot of armor here that's not going to be easy for us to chew through at all. And so I am going to manage to slip past Tundra's Fox's lines with my Sentries of Gelion, but there are still Fryswear in these woods here. You can already see him beginning to shadow me, so this is a very capable and relentless defense from Tundra's Fox with his backline sort of guerrilla units, trying to keep us out of the honeypot and prevent us from getting into the sort of juicy, chewy center. Up here on the hill, you can see that Artorias has mixed in some of his Ironshod Ravagers with the Thralls of Angband. That's going to allow him to sort of take these strong positions and just be a little bit more aggressive with his Thralls and things like that, because as I mentioned earlier, the Ravagers are extremely good at trading with cavalry, so anything that we try to throw at them to get at the nice chewy Thralls is going to be blunted by a charge from the Ravagers unless we're able to sort of do something to pull them out of the way or eliminate them entirely. And so, my Green Elf Light Cavalry has managed to rejoin the heavier cavalry force of Tolan Gauderhoth, and we're going to sort of take an advanced position up here. I'm going to try and use this hilltop. I can see Thunder's Fox moving up here, and we can see Artorias is now going to begin to double back a little bit now that he sees where all my cavalry and my allies' cavalry are heading. And they're going to have a really scary gun line up here. So if I can avoid that by just staying slightly out of range, hugging this red line, then that's obviously a good thing for us. And I think my main target is going to be these arbalists here. So this is sort of a fine line to walk, isn't it? I'm trying to outrange the Freiswehr, who can of course move forward and pen me in with a hail of missiles, but I also need to stay out of range of the arbalists as well, because a crossfire from those two units would be, it would just be disgusting. My green elves would fall apart almost immediately. Yep, so you can see us getting some decent shots off here. Thralls are being moved forward now to sort of counter this aggressive push from my horse archers. I'm going to take it a little bit and allow them to just basically machine gun as many of these units as we possibly can. They will take down some of the thralls, and that as just sort of collateral damage from shooting at the arbalists. Yeah, some more of the thralls being recalled from the top of that hill, trying to defend themselves against the green elves there. I'm going to feint backwards, and then bring forward a second company of my green elves, bring them in really, really close. Of course, be careful here. Those arbalists could turn around and shoot at us. We need to take down as many of their ranged units as we possibly can. Some of the Rigswehr have now shown their faces. I think there's about 4 or 5 units of them. And now we can see what's taking shape here. So let's go ahead and slow down just a little bit, because this is where things get really chaotic. So, several battalions, basically, there's probably about 2,000 or so troops here, have pushed forward, and they've been met with a hail of green elven arrows. We're going to scythe our way through most of these the thralls rather of Angband, cutting them down from 200 to 80 in just a matter of moments. You can see some of my sentries of Gelion have now pulled back, and they're going to be basically providing close range mobile support. And my skirmishers, Rathloriel, and my Urfinen Tower using all of their ammunition while I still have the opportunity to do so. And now we're going to see a bit of an aggressive push here. So I saw an opportunity to use my Riders of Wheelwind very aggressively. And the Macemen, because of their low melee defense that comes with being a mace unit, are the perfect target for this. And we're actually going to catch him almost completely by surprise. We're going to kill about half of that Tormentor unit in just a single charge. And so Riders of Wheelwind doing great. I want to leave them here to sort of bunch him up if I can. And I'm going to follow that up with an attack here from my Hunters of Rathloriel, and they are going to be focusing these Spear Guard who have now coalesced around this front line here, trying to get a piece of my Outriders of Wheelwind. And now as they retreat, we're going to have the opportunity to just unleash a storm of javelins upon the Angband troops. We'll manage to take down a fair few of them. I think we'll be able to follow that up now with a second volley. We do have to be careful here. Don't want to get these hunters caught out before we're able to use the majority of their ammunition, if not all of it. But Artorias is going to immediately go on the offensive, which of course I think is the right idea here. So these guys are going to retreat under a hail of fire. My ally Amar is going to see the situation. He's going to move forward to try and do something about it. These guys are going to toss one more javelin volley here, managing to cut their way through about 20 or 30 or so of the Spear Guard, and then they're going to be forced to a retreat. And now my sort of layered defense here is going to kick into action. So we've got some scouts of Gelion over here, and we've got some supporting units as well. So another company here of the Spearhost of Rathloriel moving forward. I'm going to send forward a second company of Javelins to try and deal with the Spear Guard of the Iron Crown, because they are such a tough unit to break down. See my Outriders of Wheelwind going forward, and I realize there's not really many good targets for them here. Artorias has done a good job at screening his approach, at least at this point, with Wretches and with Spear Guard and things like that. And so I'm going to take my Outriders, and I'm going to see an opportunity over here. So my Urfinen Tower have charged into battle uphill here to try and blunt this Halid advance. I've actually got some routing over here as well. I'm not too sure how that happened. Probably, yeah, I would imagine with the poison arrows, you can see them like raining down death and destruction here upon the Rigswehr. But I'm going to see an opportunity with my cavalry to charge through the lines, and I know that because we are at such a disadvantage in close quarters, every little bit is going to help. So if you see an opportunity to be aggressive like this, you kind of have to take it. And so Outriders going to charge forward, smash into the Square-to-Brother from the rear, and at the same time there's a volley of javelins coming in from those Scar-High trappers as well.
Good tidings.
And really good news here. Amar manages to snipe the Haladin general. You can see it over here. I don't even think he realized the general was in there, but he did charge this unit down so that there's an attack of opportunity, and it happened to take the Haladin general with him. Now, the Haladin, as I mentioned, have really good morale, so this is one of those things that like they can kind of shake off better than other factions, but nonetheless, a pretty nice catch there. Oh no, these Haladin. These poor ladies, they get charged down by the Vorback Gajutar as well, and this is where sort of the important kind of crazy stuff happens. So we've managed to get that nice rear charge there on the Square-to-Brother, take them down to about half health. I drew my Outriders back, and then I brought them forward here, seeing an opportunity to be even more aggressive. So we're just going to turn them around here and go for a nice little rear charge and try and support the Earthman Tower, who are suffering quite mightily at the hands of the Square-to-Brother. That's Relentless can really do a number on low melee skill units such as the Earthman Tower. They're deadly on the offensive, but when it comes to just a prolonged melee, they will lose out to a lot of units. And now I've managed to kind of break through here. There's nothing to stop me, but I can see some of the Ironshod Ravagers moving forward, and I'm definitely wary of them. So I'm going to turn around, go for a nice charge here. I saw some Wretches, and I thought maybe if I was lucky I could break them. The Wretches are not exactly known for their resilience. But I can see Artorias beginning to turn around, so I'm immediately going to pull them out of here. And this is sort of like a moment of truth for my Outriders of the Wheelwing, because you're going to see their morale. Oh yeah, they're getting charged by Spear Guard in a few different places. This was a really close call. You're going to see their morale drop even all the way down to Wavering. And they're going to move through these Arbalists here, and they're going to make it to Shaken, but they're also going to drop back down to Wavering. And now the Thralls of Angband are going to be the subjects of their tender mercies. They're going to charge headlong in there. That's going to be really, really painful for these Thralls. So it's going to be really important at keeping these Outriders as mobile as possible, avoiding the Wretched, or avoiding the Ravagers, and avoiding some of the counterfire from the Arbalists and things like that, and just trying to keep our enemies confused and off balance. Over here, we kind of dived in to the back of the line. We managed to destroy a unit of Thralls, but we are being quite swiftly repulsed. This is where the Waltriders have a chance to exact a little bit of revenge. Both the companies were brought over here, and they have smashed one unit of the Gijek Skaraz, Zagul Collab, and the others are actually carving their way through the Wolf Riders when the Waltriders managed to get in to the rear. And you can see some Rigsware reinforcements, a whole bunch of the Rigsware in fact, and now the Freisware out of ammunition are being brought down as an anti-cavalry shield. So the Gijek Skaraz are going to pull out of there as quickly as they possibly can. The Thrang Sheik have managed to get out of there as well, and so now we've got 2 or 3 units of cavalry just running roughshod over the back lines of these troops here. Other Waltrider Dragoon units have been deployed to the other side, but this is where the magic is really going to happen in this game. So we're going to smash into the Square-to-Brother, smash into the Huskarlar. There's a possibility of some routing there, but I don't want to stick around long enough to find out. We're going to pull those guys back out again. Our allies now joined us with his Gijek Skaraz and with his Thrang Sheik, and we're really just well positioned to be a complete nightmare for our opponents here. And I think I've already pulled my other unit of cavalry out, yes indeed, so we did smash into some troops over here, and I was able to precipitate a little bit of routing. You can see the Mardrod have now moved in. My other unit of cavalry, yeah, taking some light casualties here, but a fifth of the unit is not exactly light casualties. But they're going to now double back and see an opportunity, hopefully, to get a piece of some of these Arbalists, because we can't let these ranged units stick around. We are kind of winning the infantry fight, but big blobs like this, that is a perfect target for the Arbalists, and I can bet you any money that's exactly what they're going to go for right now. Oh, I see what they're going for. They're going after some of the Ash Priests there. I'm surprised they didn't go for the big blob. That's a really easy target, and the blood drinkers and all the other stuff, they take some pretty severe casualties there. But yeah, so we're going to swing wide as we can without the Outriders of Dweilwyn. It's pretty easy when something is like coming around the hills like this to actually miss them, even though they're like on their way very, very close to some of your units. So that's something you can use to sort of dissimulate your intentions a little bit, is just trying to play a little bit wider. So Ironshod Ravagers here, charging in against Throngsheik Wolfborn, getting a good piece of them, and I think we might see the Throngsheik begin to rout here as those casualties start to mount. Also missiles coming in there as well. I'll be very surprised if they didn't rout off here. And they're going to go for one final glorious charge if they are able. I think they're going to target the Bulldogs, which is a really, really good choice. If they can decapitate the General, then that's just going to cut the head right off the snake. And a lot of these lower tier and mid tier units are going to have some struggles in staying in the fight for longer. While all that is going on, I see an opportunity here. Charge in to both the Ironshod Ravagers and the remains of the Arbalists. Not too many of them left. And now the rest of those victorious forces are coming over the hill, so there's going to be a second wave of reinforcements. A little bit of cavalry, which will now be a bit of an issue for us, because they're going to be marauding around trying to, well, probably trying to shut down the cavalry that we do have. There goes the rest of the Gijek Skadas. Throngsheik trying to do their best here. There's just not enough of them that are left over. I'm seeing an opportunity here with my Outriders. Going to smash into those ring square. They're going to get a decent amount of kills here before they're even able to toss their javelins. Now over here, you can see that we smashed in with the Outriders into the Ironshod Arbalists. I can see some Fryswear coming in. Good teamwork here on the part of Thunderous Fox and Artorias, trying his best to screen his allies' skirmishers from the predations of my light cavalry. But they're quick enough, they're going to be able to get out of there before the Fryswear can really get a good piece of them. And now we've managed to actually break that line on our right side. That'd be our enemy's left. We managed to shatter their left wing. They are still kind of holding out over here. Scarhead Longfangs and all those other things are not going to be able to do too great to the Ash Priests, the telltale smoky fire bombs of the Ash Priests, probably trying to target the Bulldogs and do what they can. It's just utter chaos here. But the Scarhead Trappers have now been committed in as a reserve, and the Yangband units will probably slice their way through them pretty easily, but this is still where things are looking very, very desperate indeed. And so I brought in as many of my spearmen as I could. There's Hunters of Wrath L'Oreal in here, there's Spear Host of Wrath L'Oreal, and they're going toe-to-toe with some very heavy Angband units, such as the Ravagers and the Spear Guard of the Iron Crown, backing each other up. And that is a fierce 1-2 punch that the Green Elf line, at least with the units that I have over here, is not really in a position to battle effectively. Most of them are spearmen, and the ones that aren't are low damage daggermen. So this is just a lot of really defense and defensive units. They're just trying to hold out for as long as we can so that our cavalry can win the game elsewhere. I'm back here. My Outriders of Dweilwyn have taken horrendous losses. The Welsh Rider Dragoons get a nice little piece of them here, cutting down a few, but also being slain in turn by a few of those Outriders. Oh man, they basically get cut down to the last man there, but there is still a functional unit. I see them smash into a combined line here of Ravagers and Rigswear. Outriders of Dweilwyn, seeing all of those missiles flying overhead basically reminds you that that missile units exist, so it is kind of a cue to like go in and deal with them if you are at all able. But now we get into some kind of interesting basics here of cavalry charging. So you can see aware players will turn their units around, so you need to be careful when you charge them back of, say, pikes or Ravagers, because if they do have enough time to turn around and countercharge you, then they'll make you pay for that cavalry charge in turn. But there are some things that you can do to sort of bait a response here, and one of them is feinting and just being very, very quick, not pulling out too far before you issue another charge order. So that's one of those techniques you'll see right there. Managed to catch those wretches by surprise. And then we sort of, because I went out so far and then I turned around, I knew that this would be kind of a time to consider feinting. So you can see that this is really highly telegraphed. Oh no, we do actually charge in on this one. Managed to catch Artorias kind of off guard there a little bit, smashing down some of those Ravagers. You can see us pulling out. We're going to make it look like we're going to do the same thing, so we're going to pull out there. actually go after the rigs where? I managed to get quite a few charges here, so it's hard to keep track of them sometimes. Alright, so we've made our presence known. I think this is the point where we kind of make it look like we're going to go for his back line, and then we're going to switch targets immediately and go after the rig square. And you can see that we do bait that response there from the Iron Shot Ravagers. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Very aware players will kind of expect you to charge into them when you have cavalry behind their lines, and they will try to make you pay for it. So we're going to be able to get out of there before those Ravagers are really able to do anything, and our Outriders of Wheelwind are going to get 3 or 4 charges off before our enemy has a chance to react. And we'll just quickly move from their part of the line, so that, and hope that Artorias isn't paying attention, and get another nice little charge there. We'll try to Dragoons trying to play catch up and shut down our troops if at all they can. But there is another option here as well, and body blocking can be particularly useful for this. So we're going to throw our Outriders in here. We're also going to use some sentries of Gellion as sort of body blockers for them. So we're going to be able to just sweep away a lot of those units, but we're also going to throw in a unit we don't care as much about. So we're going to go from 11 Outriders to 8, which is far, far better than we would have if we took the brunt of that charge of both Spearmen and Axemen on their own. And instead, our sentries of Gellion are going to be the ones who feel the sting of those Orcish axes and spears. Then we're going to split up our cavalry so that we have an opportunity to hit somewhere else, not putting all of our eggs in one single basket. And at this point, they've basically broken through this wing because of all the stuff they managed to put in there. And I see an opportunity to go after the Bulldogs. Sometimes hard to pick them out in the chaos, but we're going to go for it. Try and cut down some of them. They're still very, very healthy, though. I think we only really managed to kill 1 or 2 off of that charge. And our Outriders are going to get out of here. But there is good news. We have managed to defeat the assault on our right wing, and now MR is going to be able to kind of swing back in this direction. I'm going to be able to use my Kinsmen of Denethor, along with some Ash Priests here, to take on both the Bulldogs and everything else that is victorious from the attacking right wing. Got the Ash Priests over there, Bulldogs charging into them as well. It's like a Bulldog showdown, basically. These are both Bulldog units, just with different sort of flavors. And now we're going to come in with some of our reinforcements as well. And because I can see that he's got a lot of troops still over here, crushing what's left of our Hunters of Rathloriel, I am not going to commit all of my troops immediately to this fight. This is obviously a very juicy flanking opportunity, but if we do that, and this doesn't really matter too much here because we are like soundly defeating them, they don't really have the numbers, but it is something to bear in mind. This is kind of where I was at in my headspace, where I didn't want to commit everything to a flanking attack immediately, because then they could just counterattack with all of these troops over here and potentially roll up my line and blunt that attack. And the Scouts of Gellion are reasonably skilled in close quarters, but they don't have the greatest morale response, and of course they're not exactly infantrymen, are they? So I didn't want to commit them to something like that. So you're going to see a bit of a staggered approach here. We move in with those Scouts of Gellion, allow ourselves an opportunity to sort of buffer the line with Kinsmen of Denethor, and then once these troops begin to move in, then we can start to move in our Green Elves and move for that sort of envelopment with far less fear of retaliation. I think MR at this point actually had to leave, so he's like AFK right now. So most of his infantry are not really going to be super mobile for this last sort of stretch of the replay. But that's okay. There's more than enough of our Green Elves left to mop up any of the survivors. Over here, this was important too. I actually pulled back my skirmishers and reformed them to face the rig square because I noticed that they were like their formation was very deep, but their length was shallow, and it's something you want to try and do because it does have an effect on combat resolution overall. So if you can widen your line to sort of envelop your enemy in this way, you're going to take a lot less casualties and you're going to kill them off way quicker. So if you're playing for time, that's a good way to save yourself a little bit agonizing. Spear Guard now fighting basically back to back. Some routing units here being chased off. We will circle back to delete what remains of the Angband forces here. A final rear charge from my Outriders is going to be enough to frighten the Spear Guard off the field and actually relieve the Hunters of Rathloriel, who were so hopelessly besieged just a few moments before. And the Outriders of Wheelwind maybe looking for another opportunity here. I think I did see Some skirmishers coming back. Yeah, I can see some of them here. The arbalists from Artorias. Looks like they still have ammunition. It's going to be a bad idea to maybe shoot into the back of the eject scout as chosen, but I think at this point the battle is pretty much over. Yeah, we busted through what remains over here. I think we've run down some of the survivors. And there's just a few Angband troops in the center, and basically none of them are going to be allowed to escape here. Oh, nice little countercharge here from the Arbalist. Looks like it's going to be able to claim the lives of many of my Sentries of Gelion, unless I can get a move on real quick here. Oh, no. A little charge. Oh, these guys went from, like, steady to broken in, like, a second there, but that's not surprising. They're not exactly a frontline unit. They don't have a good morale response. And then down goes the Angband General. That's basically it. My cavalry will have free run here to run down the rest of these Arbalists. But of course, they're not going to be able to go too far. There's one final line of the men of Brethil charging forward in a final glorious stand. Unfortunately, it's not going to get them very far. You can see some skirmishes. Rathloriel here. Kinsmen of Denethor. Smash into the Fryswear. And the high morale of the Haladin does serve them well here. But they won't be able to stand for too long. That's going to be the final percentage there. 76 to 93. Like I said, not a blowout for one side or the other, but not exactly the closest game either. There are some really, really good plays in this, I think, by our team and by the other one as well. Turner's Fox is, of course, very relentless in his defense of our back lines. He really did keep me on my toes when it came to like using my skirmishers. Didn't really let me have it all my own way, which is of course what you want to do. You don't want to just get bullied by Green Elf skirmishers. You want to bully back just a little bit yourself. And I think that he would have been better served to use the Welsh Rider Dragoons not just as an independent, unsupported force, but as a sort of a mobile element of a combined detachment to, you know, push me back and fight my my skirmishers that way, because I had the mobility advantage, I had the range advantage, and of course I had the longevity and positioning advantage. So I was able to sort of attack Tundra's Fox when he was weakest, when he had to retreat, and he had nothing there to sort of stop me from pursuing him. Whereas when we were doing our retreats, they were a little bit more measured, I think that's fair to say. We always had something covering the retreat of another unit so that, you know, you couldn't just smash into them or just chase them with impunity. So if you wanted to go toe-to-toe with our skirmishers, you were gonna pay for it unless you had some support that could sort of outplay our own. So I think that's probably the biggest mistake that was made there, because if those cavalry were like at full strength or like 3/4 strength moving in to sort of the middle part of the battle when we were like charging their back ranks and just running roughshod all over their skirmishers and just disrupting their lines of archers and crossbowmen and things like that, whereas ours were able to just fire freely with impunity basically the entire match until they ran out of ammunition. I actually ran out of ammo on every single one of my Scouts of Gelion, and if you look at the damage they did, you can really see like where this Green Elf army's like scary units were, and those are the units that were allowed to fire freely most of the time. I'd never actually I don't think I'd played with MR before, at least not in a 2v2. I don't think we've ever played a 2v2 together, but I have to say I was really, really impressed. He read the battlefield well. He knew exactly where to be, when to be there. He read our enemy's tactics early on. He told me, hey, they're going to try and overload that wing, and I'm like, damn, you're right. So I, moved all my javelins over there, moved as many of my like kind of stickier spear troops over there to try and put up resistance for as long as we could, because we always knew that it was going to come down to our cavalry, and we were able to pick off a lot of their ranged units, sort of piecemeal when we were able to dive into them on the other side of that hill. You saw that with the Tulin Gaurhoth heavy cavalry, and also my horse archers were engaged in that as well. We took pretty grievous losses, but we did manage to save at least 2 units of the 5 cavalry that we threw in there, and that was more than enough. The Throng Sheik and the Gijak Scouters at Glukulab marauding in the back, in addition to my Outriders, and just ping-ponging back and forth across their missile line, while our troops were basically fighting at full capacity the whole time. Our missile troops were just raining down death and destruction, and that was basically what took us to victory in that game. They had the numbers advantage, they had the melee prowess advantage, but we were able to kind of turn things around a little bit, mostly by smashing into their ranged units, because they did sacrifice some things like pole arms, for example, in order to bring more of the high-end troops, and that's something that can work. Especially when it comes to the highly armored Angband units, they can just outlast the Green Elves, especially with the comp that I brought. So that can work, but they just weren't able to use the things that they really invested heavily into, and that would have been indispensable for countering our particular factions and the strategies that we employed. So, yeah, really, really good game. Like I said, there's a lot to kind of look at there, and it really does get to the essence of like what I think Silmarillion Total War should be about. I think that you should like be rewarded for being aggressive, rewarded for positioning and your tactics, and like being kind of like sneaky and a little bit like unconventional and things like that. So I think that was on display here today. You know, maybe I'm wrong. I was in this game, I won. Maybe I'm just full of crap and, you know, talking myself up. But I think that is something that was visible today, and hopefully you guys noticed that as well. Hopefully you're excited to, you know, jump into these multiplayer matches and to have these experiences for yourself. Silmarillion Total War will hopefully have a new patch for you. I'm not too sure when. I am considering bumping it up a little bit once testing for Gondolin and the Haladin is completely finished, so that you have access to these new factions and the new maps and the new battle editor assets and all that cool stuff a little bit earlier than the 6-month or like 8-month timeline that I gave previously. But of course, again, I don't give any promises or assurances for a specific time. But I would like to get it out a little bit earlier if at all possible, because the changes that we have made on our test build to like everything from artillery to light infantry, to the way the elephants work, to like projectile speeds on javelins, so that there's like nice interplay between microing your elephants to try and dodge the slightly slower javelins, and, you know, the javelins like trying to focus fire down these big units with their big hitboxes. Little things like that I think add a lot of satisfying like gameplay options in terms of like micromanagement and things like that. So hopefully we have it out for you a little bit sooner than anticipated, but of course we'll see. In any case, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. Hope you're having a wonderful holiday season. I hope you'll join me for whatever comes next. Take care, everybody.